Hello, I'm George, and in case you didn't know, I love Dartmoor. Why wouldn't you? Besides the stunning views and extraordinary landscape, there's beautiful and unique nature, fascinating relics of ancient times, and more mysteries and legends than you can shake a pixie at. It's perfect. Literally nothing could improve it. Oh, unless there was a secretive network of obsessive people exchanging clues and coordinates to locate a series of hidden containers, each with unique collectible stamps. Yes, join me as I dip my toe into the intriguing world of Dartmoor letterboxing. Welcome back to the Dartmoor podcast. Now, unsurprisingly, this isn't actually the first time I've discussed letterboxing on this channel. Back in 2022, a couple of mates and I went on a pilgrimage to find the first ever letterbox at the remote Cranmere Pool. I collected the legendary stamp, stamped in the logbook with my own stamp, left a note, and felt like I'd taken my first steps towards joining the ranks of the letterboxing cabal. I even set up my own box in what could be the most niche piece of marketing ever performed by a podcast, not a podcast. But since then, my letterboxing journey has been a frustrating one. Despite many Dartmoor adventures, I have only a handful of stamps to my name. I had to admit I was just terrible at it. I diligently planned my route, note down the clues, and spent ages poking around under boulders and gorse bushes to no avail. And there was no hope of improving either, as I didn't even really know why I was so bad at it. Was it that my compass skills were wonky, my clues were out of date, or something else? I didn't have a frame of reference, and despite reading this, I realised that even if I managed to somehow master the technique, there was a bewildering rabbit hole of letterboxing lore and etiquette to navigate. I was going to need some help. So, on a spectacularly beautiful Sunday morning, I found myself walking up Black Hill to meet Ed, or Rat Boy as he is known in the many letterbox logbooks of Dartmoor. How did I know that Ed was the man to educate and train me in the letterboxing art? Well, despite it being in situ for almost 2 years now, he is the only person to have ever found my letterbox. Well, with some help from his friend Si and faithful hound Mabel, as this footage he sent me attests. And the reason my letterbox has been found so few times might be because my coordinates weren't particularly accurate, so that really does show some skill on the part of the finders. If he could locate the Dartmoor podcast letterbox despite the wonky directions, then I could definitely learn a trick or two from him. But what would Rat Boy be like? I'd never met him in person, and despite the glorious weather, had a feeling of trepidation as I made my way towards Haytor for our rendezvous. Well, I needn't have worried, because Ed turned out to be one of the nicest blokes I've ever met, offering to take photos for families, picking up litter, sharing his tea, and generally putting me and my awkward social skills at ease. Before we got too deep into finding the boxes, we sat down for a little chat so I could find out what drove Ed to spend his weekends out here looking under rocks.
Can I do the tired joke when I say welcome to the Dartmoor podcast and you say it's not a podcast?
It's not a podcast,
Yeah,
though, George,
perfect,
is it?
exactly. I like to start asking about, just briefly, who are you and what's your connection to Dartmoor?
I am a local lad. I was born in Tavistock back in '92 and grew up in the surrounding area, mainly in the Tamar Valley. Grew up spending a lot of time outdoors, and my granddad was a very active letterboxer, going out most chances he had, especially after he retired. And when I was a teenager, I'd often follow him around with my cameras doing various college photography projects, and just planted that seed in my mind so that when I was a bit older and had time on my hands and perhaps wanted some time away from work and the city and, a sort of big green space to, just to be in, away from the noise of the world, it sort of just presented a really great opportunity to find a lot of peace and quiet. So you know, immediately it puts you out in nature,
Yeah.
you know, far off the beaten path, and it encourages you to learn how to use a map and compass and read the land, you know, try and avoid the bogs and find your way around.
I mean, so that's the appeal, basically. Is it that, or is there a bit of like, do you like solving the puzzles and the riddles? I know I love that kind of thing.
I think it's just a mishmash of all of that, really. There's definitely, especially when you get started, there's a bit of a buzz around finding stamps and, you know, getting your numbers up, and there's something called the 100 Club. So when you find your first 100, you can enrol in the 100 Club. You get a little badge there, which is on my bag, and a membership card. So that's very exciting. But then there comes a time when actually it becomes less about how many you find and perhaps you know, more about the day out that you have.
Yeah.
Stopping every 2 minutes to pick up a box can be quite boring compared to having a really nice walk, I think.
Yeah, you did mention in the little communication we had that you have a sort of quality over quantity approach. I wondered what you meant by that. What makes a quality letterbox then? I'm guessing it's not that it's like really well hidden or something, or is it just that it takes you to a beautiful place? Or
Yeah, I think, again, it depends. It depends on who you ask. But for me personally, I like certainly the stamp to have the place of the place name of where it was found on there, so it's almost a souvenir of where you've been. Because when I wanted to get out to Dartmoor initially, it was just to start tour bagging and just to try to see as much of the place as I could. And I thought to myself, I wonder if there's a letterbox for all these different tours, and then that way I've got a sort of souvenir of each tour I've bagged and evidence of where I've been and a way of remembering the day. And that's when I came across a letterboxing series, which put out by a chap, and there is a stamp for most of the tours.
Right,
and for me that was obvious. For okay, well, I'll go and hunt those, and then I'll be tour bagging at the same time. And when you sort of catalogue them, I scrapbook mine, and we put them side by side, and I don't know, it's a bit nerdy, but to me it looks great.
No, that's right up my street. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that at all.
Back to the interview later. Let's find our first box. Today we would be collecting the series Ed just mentioned, one for each of Dartmoor's tours, starting with the box for Haytor.
There's an element of, this is a really busy spot, but how many of these people know there's a letterbox here? So an element of like, we know something you don't. We have secret knowledge of the land below the ground.
I'd love to say no.
And it wasn't long before I learnt my first tip.
Now, this is where we can be clever. Haytor left-hand outcrop needs to be on 009, so we can take a back bearing, which is basically just add or subtract 180, and we'll walk away in that direction until saddle tour.
With the fancy nautical compass setting us on the right track, we were led towards a swampy dip with a view back to the majestic tour itself. Don't worry, by the way, no precise locations of letterboxes are revealed in this video. That would be very bad form.
One pace from a large rock towards Saddle Tor, about 3 paces from the large rock, plugged beside a much smaller rock.
The first box of the day didn't give itself up easily. Ed and I wandered to and fro for quite a while trying to find a place where all the bearings lined up, and even then a lot of poking about under rocks and bushes was needed.
It's up here. Left-hand outcrop is on about 7.
Yeah, it's not a small rock near a big rock either, is it?
In the process, we turned up a fox's skull and some bizarrely situated frog spawn before our prize was found. And I was actually very reassured by this arduous searching. It was very reminiscent of my own travails and showed me that I probably wasn't doing too much wrong in my own failed letterboxing attempts. Except that where I would have given up, Ed didn't, and he lived up to his rat boy moniker, tenaciously scuttling among the boulders and gorse until the secret cache was located. I had had a lesson in perseverance. Ed popped open the container and immediately looked through the logbook. His first thought,
Look in the logbook.
had his granddad been there?
See that he's been here and found it, which is quite nice, really, because to think that, it's usually around 2008, but over 10 years ago he was here sort of solving the same clue, if you like, and it feels, I don't know, like being connected in some strange way. So that was first sighted in 1995, so to think it's almost 30 years old now.
Yeah.
Come on. Through and see who's been recently, and
Oh right, of course, yeah, you sort of recognise the people you know.
yeah, it's always the same usual suspects. Sometimes when you see someone you don't know, you're like, ooh, who's that?
Do you get people who come over from like other places, or are they all local people?
Yeah, loads of people, lots of Germans and Dutch people, and
Are there like moors on areas of like Germany and Holland which have got letterboxes as well then, or is
good
it?
question. You have to ask them. There have been little cells popping up around the world. It's quite big in the States now.
Right, really?
Yeah. And it's nice because if you check out their scenes online, usually it is linked back to Dartmoor and stuff, so it's kind of cool. There's a theory, it either comes from psychology or sociology, and it's called the flow state. Have you ever heard of it?
Right, yes, like when you get completely into doing something, yeah.
And you just, it might be like, I'm sure you've been driving and you suddenly think, oh my god, I'm here, and I don't remember that whole drive. And I just think there's something about letterboxing where you get sucked into, you're focusing on it, where you're putting your feet. You're in that flow state, and you're suddenly not thinking about all the stresses, and you're not thinking about bills or what's going on in work, or I don't know, anything negative that might be going on in your life or worrying you, and you're just sort of very much in the moment, focusing on the game, the challenge, and it's just, for me, such a hard reset for your normal working week.
Yeah.
And I find that I feel topped up and replenished, and then going into work in the week, I'm a better version of myself, and more ready to handle, life again. It is, very therapeutic.
Right. Well then, into the serial killer notebook it goes. So, oh, that's the messiest stamp I've ever done, but that's beautiful. Pretty pleased with that.
Our second box of the day was, theoretically, to be found a short walk away near Holwell Rocks, guarded by an absolute beast of a sheep.
Oh no, a bit ripped.
It's a shame.
But despite a long and thorough search, we had to admit defeat on this one. Success, it would seem, isn't guaranteed. But maybe this is part of the appeal.
Some rubbish. If you're letterboxing in its true form, for me, there's something about using a map and compass and using, a paper clue that's sometimes really cryptic, and then maybe going out in the rain and not finding it 2 times and finding it on the 3rd go. You can't really describe the feeling. It's when you go out and perhaps you don't find it, and it keeps you up at night thinking, what did I do wrong, or is it there, or
Yeah.
often the feeling is it's just I never have to come back.
Yeah.
I can move on with my life.
To this damp and
Yeah.
boggy part of the moor. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I've done a little bit of geocaching. My mate Dave's really into it. And it is, when I sort of first thought, I'm going to have to go at Letterboxing, I thought, oh, it's going to be just like that, it's going to be easy. But it's so much more difficult, and I guess that's the difference, isn't it? That's more like, we want you to come and find this and you to succeed in finding it, whereas the Letterboxing is a bit more evil, really.
Yeah, I know people who would say it's no fun if it's not a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think ideally, in my opinion, the perfect letterbox is one that you wouldn't find unless you had the clue of how to find it.
Right, yeah.
So they are often very well hid, yeah.
Letterboxing may be no picnic, but we stopped for a picnic and admired the view. Ed speculated that this particular box might have actually gone missing. The unique registration number of each box in the guide meant that this was the oldest box of the day, perhaps having been here since the 70s or 80s. And this long-lost box was perhaps a symptom of wider decline in letterboxing as a hobby. Although enthusiastic young boxers like Ed are keeping the flame alive, there's a general feeling that the heyday of letterboxing is behind us. Many of the people who pursued letterboxing back in the 80s and 90s are getting on in years, and yomping over the moor before clambering among the clitter is a young man's game. In fact, Ed is working on a fascinating video project to try and ascertain just how much letterboxing popularity has waned over the years.
I was just going to say, do you want to explain your film you're making as well?
Yeah, sure. That might put some pressure on me to actually get on and finish editing.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
In a nutshell, I've been boxing for about I think it's my 4th year now, and I've come to realise that we are in a sort of post-golden age era for letterboxing.
Yeah.
I think letterboxing was kind of at its peak in the 80s and 90s. There would be hundreds, thousands of letterboxers out, sort of very, very enthusiastic, calling each other up, getting advice, and going out most weekends, meeting up in pubs at the end of the day to swap war stories and show each other what stamps they'd found and exchange information. But these days it seems as though the numbers are in decline, and that in the sort of 2000s and the teenies it sort of dropped off a cliff really in terms of activity. So knowing that and picking up on that trend, I just wanted to try to maybe generate some kind of stats and figures about what's going on and try to compare that to some of the logbooks I'd found where you could go in 1 year, over 100 people had visited in a really remote place. So I made a series of stamps called the Dartmoor Letterboxing Census, and there were 4 stamps distanced at different distances out on the moor, one right by the roadside, one half a mile out, another 2 miles out, and then one sort of 4 miles out at Cut Hill, the furthest part of the moor from any road. Just so that at the end of the year, when I took them in, I looked at the logbooks and I could see how many people had visited, and which gave me a sort of idea of how many people are letterboxing and to what extent, so that I can combine that data to the old data. Yeah, and I haven't published my data yet. Because,
keep it secret until the video comes out. I think that's going to be great.
As we headed towards Smallacombe Rocks to look for another box, I thought about all the people sat at home nursing hangovers, scrolling away on their phones in front of Sky Sports News. They were missing out. I was having a great day. Good company, dramatic views, fresh air and exercise. The world needs more of these niche hobbies. As well as the personal benefits they bring, they add a bit of colour and flavour to our increasingly homogenised existence. I hope that the cycle of time brings letterboxing back into vogue. And, thanks to Ed's expertise, it wasn't long before we were stamping in again. Ed regaled me with tales of boxers past and present, and I began to get a feel for the ethos of the thing. Overwhelmingly one of camaraderie and humour.
Beautiful, that's what you're...
But as with all these unusual subcultures, its fair share of petty politics and jealousy too.
But it was 3,000 boxes celebrated, that's what the BC stood for.
Oh, right.
And
someone had put there, this is in celebration of our 3,000 boxes. And someone had wrote below that in the front of the book, big deal. Like, how many of those boxes were pub boxes and meat boxes and blah blah blah, and it was so cruel. And then someone wrote below that, "Mowy old git." Yeah. I love any sort of group where it's again so much like birders, where you get sort of little petty sort of squabbles and politics.
Oh,
and
it was hilarious.
different views of things.
Yeah, I love the passion, like, you know.
It's bad, doesn't it?
And, as it's Dartmoor, the rain came in, of course. But that wouldn't deter a stalwart like Ed. We simply sheltered in the lee of a tor and had another cuppa. Feeling like an incompetent Dartmoor Louis Theroux, I pushed to see if there was another deeper level to this letterboxing lark.
Trust. So I was quite lucky because I had my granddad and his network who knew me as as references, essentially.
I was met with a wry smile and a hint that there was a whole world of word-of-mouth boxes out there for those who could prove their trustworthiness and dedication. But for the most part, letterboxing is very welcoming, and I feel Ed in particular is bringing it upon himself to try and recruit some fresh blood to the hobby. I asked him what he thought the best way to get started was.
I think that letterboxing can be a really tricky hobby to break into if you are new to it. So my advice would be go along to one of the meets, which happen twice a year. It's usually the Sunday around the clock change day. Have a look on the internet, have a look on Facebook, you can find the information. Go along to one of those, and they sell charity walks there. Letterboxing actually makes thousands of pounds for lots of charities, which is a really nice part about the hobby. Anyway, go along to a meet people, talk to them, ask questions, find out, get tips and advice about letterboxing, because it is quite difficult to get your head around initially, and I think people can give it a go, not find anything, and then be quite put off, especially if they get cold and wet. Get yourself a charity walk, because the boxes will definitely be there. You can use a GPS if you want to get started, and it's a good way to maybe get a dozen in one day, and especially for kids, they want to come back with something. Raise a bit of money for a good cause at the same time. And then get your hands on a catalogue while you're there. They're updated annually. It's just a really nice thing to have. Try to befriend someone who knows what they're doing, I think.
Yeah, that's my plan for today. I'm sure I'm going to pick up lots of little tips and things as we go.
It's a lot of pressure.
Lane tour 215. Okay, we know that.
And learning I was.
So that's more or less spot on.
It wasn't long before we found a third box for the day and were stamping in.
Stamp is slightly damaged. The T is missing. That doesn't matter. And the L. It's alright. First in the book, Mabel? Everyone wants to be first in the book. How many have we got now? 3?
3 out of 4. We're not counting the one that was in a completely different part of
I'm
Dartmoor.
just counting that as bad homework. Three, two, one.
And there was one more left to go. Black Hill.
Snowman murder scene.
Another box which required great perseverance to find. But find it we did. Well, Rat Boy and Mabel did.
Yeah, good work.
Ooh. Might see Grandad in here.
Yeah, quite a collection in there. It's like a little bit of a work of art you're creating with them all sort of overlapping.
Just if I want to see, what have I got recently, I just pop it in here and helps you remember. And I think it looks punk.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We collected another stamp, 4 nice matching stamps for the day, and it was time for me to head home. Ed, however, had other ideas.
Oh, can I have a very quick look at your map?
Can, of course, yeah.
I'm gonna see what the time is.
There might just be enough light left to grab one more box over by Hound Tour.
It doesn't stop there for Ed. Ed's off to find another box all the way over there.
Keep me up at night. It's it's within touching distance.
I'd had a great day and was really glad to have met Ed, a new friend and a new member of the Dartmoor podcast Irregulars.
It's not a podcast!
I headed home under a rainbow, already thinking about my next outing and my journey to the Letterbox 100 Club. I'll be sure to keep you updated on my progress. If the idea of letterboxing appeals to you, then why not do as Ed suggested? Go to the meet or on a charity walk and get your fingers inky. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.